Welcome to the Craft of Coaching podcast, where we dive into what it truly takes to become a skilled, confident life coach. I'm your host, Kate, head of the CLCC, or Certified Life Coach Collective, an ICF-accredited Level 1 coach training program. We combine courage, coaching, and community to offer you more than just a training program, but a life-changing experience where you use your own personal transformation as the learning ground for supporting your clients. On this podcast, we explore how you can use coaching skills to support your clients or expand your own growth, all grounded in evidence-based coaching practices. Learn more about our program and get free resources for becoming a life coach at teamclcc.com. And now, here's today's episode. In a previous episode of this podcast, I was talking about powerful group coaching and how sometimes in a group coaching container, there will be people who just are really, really resistant. And I even told a little anecdote about my own experience of being in a group coaching type of environment and being very, very resistant. It was unexpected for me, by the way, to feel so resistant. I felt that it was a week-long thing, and I felt that most of that entire week, like, what is wrong with me? Why is this coming up for me? Why am I so angry at everybody in the group? Why do I also simultaneously feel like I'm about to burst into tears? Why am I not wanting to participate in any of the activities? I put aside time for this. I signed up for this. Like all these things were going on in my head. And I spoke in the episode on powerful group coaching about how there was a moment in that experience where the facilitators of that experience had to really talk to me and say, look, either get on board or not participate. And I had to really get honest with myself about what I wanted. And it ended up being profoundly helpful for me. In fact, it ended up being profoundly healing for me because it was one of the first times in my life after the childhood that I walked through where people in charge, people with role power, had gently called out my behavior in a way that was calling me in, that kept my agency to make a choice about what I wanted, and that did not shame me for whatever choice I made. And that was really, really profound. And that was why I thought, you know what? We need to do, for Craft of Coaching, an episode on the quote-unquote uncoachable client and client resistance. So here we go. So I'm using these air quotes here, the uncoachable client, because I kind of don't believe in that as a concept. Hot take here. All right. So in that episode where I was talking about group coaching, I was reminding everyone, hey, it's not your job to motivate your one-on-one clients. You're not a motivational speaker. I think all of us as coaches can probably say that one of the most frustrating misperceptions about coaching is that we're just cheerleaders, that we're like this stereotype of, you can do it, I know you can. That's not what real coaching is. Validation is an effective tool, but that's not just a coaching thing, and that's not how most coaches sound. Research shows that validation and positive reinforcement do improve communication and productivity. And yeah, even athletic performance if we're going to go coaching like on the field. But there's a difference between encouragement and motivating someone. Motivation has to come from within. Your job as a coach, whether group coaching or one-on-one, and one-on-one is really what I'm going to talk about today. Your job as a coach is to hold space for what the client says they want and not collude with them in their fear or their patterns that are getting in the way. Sometimes that means reflecting what your client cannot see. Sometimes it's helping them clarify what they even want. But you're not here to light the fire under them to want it. They have to want it. If someone hasn't bought into their own vision, or if they don't know what their vision is and they are not willing to do the work to figure it out, that's their choice. That's their agency. Whether you are in one-on-one coaching or group coaching, you offer support, you articulate, hey, let's talk about it. What's going to happen if you follow this path? What's most likely going to happen if you follow this path? but you have to let go. It has to be their choice. So let's get to this label that I'm not a fan of, the quote unquote uncoachable client. I don't like it. And I don't like it for the same reason that I don't like the term tough love. In the Certified Life Coach Collective program, we consciously move away from both of these ideas. What I always say about quote unquote tough love is that if the love has to be tough, it probably ain't love. And when it comes to this idea of calling someone uncoachable, how profoundly dehumanizing that can be. Because that label, I think, can be so harmful. Instead, what I encourage coaches to do is to talk about extreme resistance. So instead of labeling your client as uncoachable, which is kind of like labeling them as can't do anything with you, good luck. Let's instead name what they're walking through. They're walking through extreme resistance. That's what it really is. It's fear. Too often, people will say, well, if you don't want it badly enough, you won't take action. And sure, on some level, that's true. But there is a bigger picture. Sometimes people really want something and they don't know how to take action, or they think they're taking action and don't realize that they're actually spinning their wheels or sabotaging themselves. Or they are so stuck in fear that taking action feels impossible. I go back to the story I started this Craft of Coaching podcast episode with. I was in a workshop that I had paid money for, was taking time away from my life to attend. I knew what the workshop was going to cover. It was a 5-day workshop. I knew it was going to be intense. I had even worked with these facilitators of this workshop before in a different workshop that was shorter and explored a slightly different topic. And I thought they were fantastic. So when I signed up for this 5-day, okay, I thought this is going to be great. And then who knew? I, the person who runs around talking all the time about courage and going after what you want and facing your fear, I was so stuck in my fear. I was so stuck in my fear that taking action felt almost impossible. So imagine in this moment, if those facilitators had approached me and said, you know what, I think you should leave, you're uncoachable. Can't something in all of us recognize the little kid within that would be so devastated to essentially be shunned by someone they had gone to for help? I don't do this. That's why I don't do this. So what do we need to do instead? Recognizing that, in fact, sometimes people are so stuck in their fear that taking action feels impossible. And with my own admission that I was not a great group participant that week. My fear was so strong that my attitude was impacting other people in the group, and that was not okay. In our CLCC program, we use a particular phrase. I invite you to use it as well. This phrase is confronting with kindness. Confronting with kindness. That's what a coach does when someone hesitates repeatedly. You reflect patterns. You hold space with compassion. You articulate what you see as the risk of continuing to be stuck in the fear-based patterns. You give your client language for articulating it. If your client is doing something that's impacting your coaching, like let's say they're always coming 20 minutes late or impacting the group, you confront with kindness. You say, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I need to shift. But you don't label them, and you don't label them uncoachable. Also, you don't use the phrase firing your client. Another one I don't like. That's not how it works. Clients are paying you. You're not their boss. I hate that whole hierarchical phrasing of firing your client. It smacks of role power that we're not even supposed to be bringing into the coaching environment. I'm not interested in power grabs with my clients. I'm interested in showing up for them with as much unconditional positive regard as I can. And if that phrase, unconditional positive regard, sounds a little familiar, you're probably thinking of Psych 101 classes that you might have taken. It's Carl Rogers. And there is a Craft of Coaching podcast episode. I think it's episode like 2 or 3 of the series, where we actually talk about Carl Rogers and unconditional positive regard. So I'm interested in showing up for my clients with unconditional positive regard. And within that, I can still say, confronting with kindness, here's something I'm seeing. I see you working against yourself in this particular way. So, with extreme resistance, what do you do when someone is really, really stuck? I've given you my framework, and now let's get into some more brass tacks. First, you remember that you can't fix or motivate people. Motivation has to be intrinsic, and the coaching relationship is not one-sided. In any co-created relationship, both parties must show up, and part of how a client shows up is by bringing a desire for change. Next, you confront with kindness. You reflect the patterns, you're compassionate, you're empathetic, but you also share what you're seeing. Now, let's say that there is a client who is so stuck in their resistance that it's not an effective coaching relationship or it's impacting the group, kind of like the anecdote I shared about my personal experience. It's okay to say, let's have a conversation about whether or not right now is the right time for you to be in coaching or be in this group experience. I've had that conversation with clients. Sometimes it leads to real clarity. The client realizes, hey, whoa, I do want to change. I'm playing out a pattern. I do want to engage more. And other times they realize it's not the right time, and that's okay too. And that's why I want to re-articulate that it was so profoundly healing for me to be in that group coaching environment that I was in and to have someone with role power confront me with kindness about how I was showing up and what needed to shift in a way that gave me agency and the power to choose. And if I wanted to choose to leave entirely, they were going to hold that with respect. So, let's say you do have a client who wants to change, but is still stuck in resistance. Maybe they don't show up for sessions or skip the practices that you two created together. Or maybe their resistance shows up as anger or sadness. Assuming that that anger is not directed at you, big, deep breaths. Come back to what is it the client really wants. Get clarity on that client's big picture goals. What do they really want to change? What is the big vision here? Bring more structure to your sessions even. At the top of every session, hey, this is your big vision. These are the 3 things that you really want to accomplish over several months of coaching. What do you want to focus on today that's related to that bigger goal? Keep coming back to the anchor. Resistance will arise, but the vision is the through line. And here's the truth that the coaching industry forgets way too often. Resistance is not wrong. Your clients are not wrong for having resistance. There's too much of this quickness to judge. Resistance is bad and no resistance is good. It's all so binary, but it's not human. Think about your own experience. Have you ever been like me and you wanted something so badly, some kind of change, but you felt paralyzed or frozen, or you were reactive or avoidant, or you self-sabotaged? Well, of course you have. Resistance is a normal part of change. So instead of making resistance wrong, engage in a dialogue with your clients. What is the resistance here to teach you? What is it trying to protect? You know, when people are dragging their feet on change, when they're avoiding action, that is a form of protection. Resistance is trying to keep them in the safety of the known. It's not a character flaw. It's fear. Change, when it's real change, it threatens our sense of identity. And for all of our talk about wanting it, Stepping into the unknown is hard. That doesn't make someone uncoachable, it makes them human. So what's powerful in coaching is when you, as a coach, can hold space outside that resistance. You don't collude with it, and you don't bypass it. You don't say, don't worry, you've got this, and tell your client to override the fear. You walk beside it. You hold space for the complexity, because that's what it means to be human. I always think of the Ram Dass quote, we're all just walking one another home. Part of that walk will include resistance. Now, of course, professional boundaries still matter. I'm not saying today that you should be endlessly available, that you should just put up with agreements that the client blows past, that you should take on someone else's process as your own and go, well, it's okay if my client is never paying me and never showing up for sessions and not doing any of the work between sessions, because actually it's about my journey as a coach to let go of any attachment that I have. I'm not saying that, okay? If a client shows resistance as anger directed at you, that's not okay. If someone's not doing their practices, you can speak into that. Hey, it's your journey. You'll get more out of it if you engage. If there's a consistent pattern of disengagement, like a kind of defeated, flat affect week after week, you can articulate, hey, this feels like a phase. I'm willing to work with it for a while. It's very normal. But if it continues, maybe we need to reevaluate if now is the right time, because my hope for you is that our coaching sessions would feel energizing. You have that professional conversation sometimes where you have to explain to a client, I notice an energy in our sessions where it feels a bit like I'm pulling you along. And to support you, I want to make sure that this is your work. That's not judgment. That's a boundary. Same as what I said too in the group coaching sessions, you can also help the client to revisit their original motivations, why they started coaching, what they wanted to change. You might want to invite them to look at the costs of not changing in a pragmatic way. Sometimes people don't realize how much they're tolerating until you reflect it. But at the heart of everything, resistance is normal. And you are being called in every coaching session to lead with love, to lead with compassion, with empathy. And that's what creates the coaching relationship where transformation is possible. You can't force change, but you can absolutely create a container where change becomes more possible than it was ever before. And frankly, it's such an honor to be a part of that. So that's why I don't do this whole uncoachable client, fire your client, all that. It's actually an honor that someone would trust you enough to say, I would like you to be beside me as I go through this wily, strange, confusing, thrilling, maddening, amazing process of change. All right, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Before you go, would you help us out and take a moment to give us a rating in iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening? It really helps us get the word out to other listeners. And before you go today, would you like free resources to support your coaching journey? Whether you're considering becoming a coach or you want advanced coach skills training, access our coaching resource library at teamclcc.com. Again, that's teamclcc.com. Can't wait to connect with you. And again, thanks for listening.